do you have questions?
I'll start, Francis.
Yeah. It's a mic jack.
Okay, so often when we talk about meditation in here, we don't talk about it as if it were an activity necessarily in its own right. We talk about it as something that can happen during any activity when we understand our true nature. So given that, I'm curious to hear from you what you think the value of silent sitting is.
It depends. Yes, there's too much there. We have to define silence. Sitting is clear. Silence, there are three kinds. There is physical silence, the absence of sound. In other words, you're not talking. There is another form of silence that would be, for instance, the absence of thoughts. And there, finally, another form of silence, which is a real silence, which is simply the absence of the belief or the feeling to be a separate entity. So, the first two types of silence don't define meditation for me. It is only the third type that defines meditation. And in fact, it is a sufficient condition for meditation. Sitting is not a necessary condition for meditation. So the absence of the belief or of the feeling to be a separate entity is a necessary and sufficient condition for meditation. But there are different definitions of meditation. But that's the one which is the most important one, in my view. Now, another definition would be doing something in order to achieve the kind of meditation I was talking about. And another possible definition would be, since consciousness is already the absolute universal reality, all beings are in constant meditation whether they are aware of it or not. You're following me? So it depends how we define meditation. So going back to sitting in silence could be part of the true meditation, sitting in silence without the belief or the feeling to be a separate entity. Now, this feeling or belief to be a separate entity can be temporarily absent, momentarily absent, if you will, momentarily absent, or it can be annihilated. In other words, definitely absent. If it is definitely absent, meditation is natural, is our natural state. if it is momentarily absent, this type of meditation is one way to lead to the annihilation of this sense of separation. The best way, the best prescription for this type of meditation would be the welcoming of the flow of thoughts and bodily sensations and external sense perceptions without trying to interfere with them, with indifference, beholding them with indifference. In other words, letting them appear, letting them unfold, letting them vanish. And usually that is done during the sitting meditation. Why? Because it's easier to achieve that while preventing any physical activity of the body, just as on the thought level, this approach to meditation prevents any interference with the flow of thoughts. In other words, there is some kind of, it's not suited for daily life that may require physical activity and mental activity. You see, if you are working, you need some continuity in the line of thought. So it is somehow an artificial exercise, but which almost immediately leads to meditation, in that sense that it momentarily suspends the belief and the feeling to be a separate entity. Because the feeling, when it is simply observed, reveals itself for what it truly is, which is bodily sensations, the feeling to be separate, the feeling to be. And the thought to be separate, when they are simply contemplated with detachment, they are simply concepts. They cease to be beliefs. A belief is a concept to which we are attached, right? With some kind of attachment to it. If a thought is simply allowed to evolve and we are simply indifferent to it, then it cannot become a belief. So then, that in this way, this approach easily places us in this type of meditation in which there is this, at least, temporary suspension of the belief and the feeling to be a limited entity. So my answer is a little complicated, and the reason is that the word meditation is confusing, because when we talk about it, there are as many types of meditations almost as there are spiritual schools.
know. Maybe I touched it. I don't know.
You save the planet.
Perfect. Okay. So what I can kind of take from this, and you can tell me how on base or off base I am here. But when we sit silently, I'll put that in air quotes, implied is the first type of silence, the physical silence, which helps us maybe to back away from the interference of our thoughts. So
Physical silence in and by itself, but we place ourselves in an absence of activity. So speaking would be a kind of activity, just as moving. As in moving our tongue and our lips is a movement, right?
Or reading a book, there's movement there. Or
yes, so we simplify, in other words, the context to facilitate this contemplation with this benevolent and indifferent beholding of the flow of mentations.
Right. Like we give ourselves a better shot at not interfering, and the non-interfering is what perhaps leads to the third type of silence, which is the silence of the belief to be a separate entity.
The moment the belief and the feeling to be separate is suspended, we are in meditation.
Right.
In other words, for as long as it lasts, it's perfect. So that's why it's very important for us to have the right understanding of what meditation is, because meditation is not a state of bliss. It's not a blissful body or a blissful mind. It is a state in which the sense and the belief to be separate and limited is simply not present. In this state, the bliss, the happiness, which is inherent in the background, or reveals itself, will reveal itself. But perhaps not right away. That which is the most important is a state of peace. If we are not subjected to the belief to be a separate entity, there is peace. The only party pooper is this belief and this feeling. So if this feeling and belief is not present at all, that's perfect meditation. And this approach to meditation, if you will, is a trick that enables us to easily take our stand as consciousness, nothing else. The problem is that if there is a sense of lack which is present, and therefore no peace, it means that we are not contemplating the flow of thoughts and bodily sensations with benevolent indifference. Because this sense of lack, we are not indifferent to it. Because we grant it power. We grant it truth. This sense of lack, if we investigate it, will reveal itself to be bodily sensations. At that moment, we distance ourselves as consciousness from this perceived object. So it's a case of discrimination, if you will, in the Indian sense, viveka, or of neti neti. I'm not this, I am something else than this bodily sensation. So often this approach is misunderstood because people who try to this approach, they are not thorough with it. In other words, that they are benevolently indifferent only up to a point. The point is when the sense of lack appears, and instead of being investigated for what it is, bodily sensations, belief systems, whatever that is, because it's one or the other or both, unless it is investigated, it will deprive us from this benevolent indifference.
Thank you. This is, where is this button?
You have to press it for some time until
Maybe it was my ankle bone when I put it down on my ankle bone. Okay, thank you. This is giving me a lot to think about. So I'll let you know if I have follow-ups.
So I'm trying to pull a few concepts from what you just said. One thing that I've been noticing this, you mentioned it before, but only now I'm getting it. The zero distance between me and perception and thought. So when you talk about, belief being this thought that I'm attached to, I take that zero distance and make it part of me. And so that's why I feel I am the thought, I am the feelings, I am the body sensations, etc. But then is it when you said, creating that distance, where then I become aware of awareness and I say, okay, even though there's zero distance, it is not me. And I see that flowing, the thought with that detachment. Do you get what I'm saying?
try to say it differently.
Okay. So what I notice is sometimes I get this sense of agitation or disturbance or something, right? And then I say, okay, I see the thought, the body sensations, and then I realize that I actually made it me. I am me. That's all part of me. And so that's where I realized that it is because there's that zero distance, it's all become part of me. Then when I say, okay, I step back and I say,
you see the beliefs that trigger the agitation, or you just see the agitation?
I see first the agitation and then realize that there's a belief.
I mean, so what is important in such a case is to see that this agitation wouldn't be there unless you would believe to be a separate consciousness.
Right. But so then once I realize that belief is present, then I think this is the battery. Is the battery still on? Can you hear it? Okay. So then I realize, then I create that. Yeah. Yeah, I become aware of the belief, and then like you said, then I create that distance between me and the body sensation and the thought.
At the moment when you become aware of the belief, since you have already investigated this belief, and having investigated this belief, you have at least, through this investigation, reached the conclusion that this belief has no legs to stand on. It doesn't mean it is false, but it means that there is no evidence supporting it, right? At which point you may choose to give the alternate possibilities the benefit of the doubt, instead of always rooting, if you will, for the ignorance team, to root for the universal consciousness team, just for the sake of the experiment. So then you suspend, through an act of reason, of intelligence, this belief.
Right, but so that's the thing. It's almost like nothing changes.
No.
Right? It's just that the same sensations appear, the same thoughts appear, or thought appears. There is still this, that zero distance, if you will, but it's just that I become aware that that is separate from me, and then I see it.
At that moment, you go back to this very important doubt, the doubt of the truth seeker. The doubt of the truth seeker is very important, and that's what distinguishes the truth seeker from the ignorant, is that the truth seeker has an essential doubt regarding the nature of consciousness. And the doubt is about this consciousness being an object, and therefore being separate, being limited. That's the doubt of the truth seeker. And the doubt of the truth seeker is the result of a glimpse of her true nature. So the moment you go back to the doubt of the truth seeker, you have a glimpse of your true nature. And somehow this connection will eliminate some residues of ignorance in the mind. In other words, you will never access the glimpse through the same path twice, because as we access the glimpse through a given path, we destroy the path. You see? So then we may find us all of a sudden teleported to a different position, if you have the picture of a mountain, right, which has only one summit, So then you may find teleported on the mountain. Ignorance, they are not mountain climbers. They are in the plain somewhere, right? The truth seekers, they are on the sides of the mountain, climbing. And so you will find yourself on a different position, and there will be a new path there. And then you climb the path, you reach the top. You will never have to climb the path twice again, this path. It may seem that way, but it's never twice the same. The reason is that really once we understand something, we don't need to understand it twice. So understanding are partial often. Yeah, you know that in mathematics, you don't get the full solution right away. But you know that this avenue doesn't work because you have understood it doesn't work. That avenue doesn't work. That avenue, every time you eliminate, you're not going to go back unless you're not a mathematician. Then you may as well do something else like liberal arts. So, yeah, that's true. It's true.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to go back to a question, to the Neti Neti explanation you gave yesterday. If I understood it right, you said something like, you know what your true nature is. That is why you're able to say no. But that was not my experience. I was so firmly of the belief that I am the body-mind.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is consciousness. Whatever it is, the reality which is hearing these words right now. Yeah. And because that's what I call I, before I call I my body or whatever, right? So the Neti Neti has to do with, question, okay, what's the color of consciousness?
Okay, so you...
And you say, no. Is the consciousness red?
Right.
No,
okay.
right?
Got it.
You can say consciousness is not red, right? Is it warm? Is it cold? It is sweet? No, it is not sweet, right?
Okay, got it. So I start from the definition of I and then go that path. But then I've so far, for a long time in my life, I had a different definition of I. And that's why I think there was the...
But that's okay, provided you have clarity. And provided you know which one matters the most. Because some people, if you have a nice car, you're attached to your car, and you don't like if someone scratches it on the parking lot at Costco, right? So you say, oh, I've been scratched. No, you have not been scratched. The car has been scratched. But in this case, it's very clear to you, you are not your car. When your body gets scratched, it's a little bit different because you are more attached, identified with the body than with the car.
Yeah, for me, I think that was the initial part of the Neti Neti process because, when I heard you say I consciousness and I go, but I have always been this body mind and I had to deconstruct that before I could even fully embrace the definition of I as being the reality which is hearing.
Yeah, but you can ask also another way. Another way is to instead of thinking in terms of consciousness for someone like you, is to ask, what is the real I? Because of your type of education and upbringing, you have this deep intuition that even if I claim, okay, I perceive that this body which perceive, and so therefore I seem to be this body. The question then is, yes, but what is as this body? Let's assume for the time being that I am this body. What is my reality? Because I am interested in the real I. What is my reality? Let's assume I am this body. You see, so then that teaches you things. You don't even have to use, in your case, the vedantic approach, which uses consciousness as a path to access the experience of reality. Other beings have the intuition of reality through other paths. You know, and for instance, some people are naturally born mystics. So they are born somehow with this deep certainty of God. And which is very, very similar, in fact, to the certainty some scientists achieve about one reality. So they are born with this absolute certainty of God, and these, as God being the reality, and these mystics, they don't need to go through the vedantic approach via consciousness because of their direct experience. So all they have to do is to say, God is the only reality. God is the reality of everything. Therefore, it is also the reality of what I am, period. No matter how I define the reality of what I am, whether I say it's consciousness, it's this body, who cares? All of those are provisional realities, right? They are only stepping stones towards the absolute.
Thank you.
Hi, Francis. So my question is, how do you see the value of a practice like gratefulness or a compassion practice, as it is working with the mind? Do you think it will reinforce your sense of separation, or?
For someone who has come here and who has heard what is said here and has come back, meaning somehow something stuck, otherwise they wouldn't have come back. So for those, practices are useless. Practice in the sense of repetition. Repetition is boring. It makes the mind and the body dull. It should be avoided. There is no creativity in it. There is no intelligence in repetition. It's like someone who learn how to play a musical instrument. We say practice makes perfect, right? Go to Carnegie Hall. But the way if the musician thinks that he plays 5 notes, right? And that in order to become a good musician, he has to play these 5 notes again and again and again. Good luck with that, because the first time he's going to play these 5 notes, they are going to be quite lousy, right? Unless he has a very good musical karma, but in most cases. So if he repeats these 5 notes again and again and again, he would just become an expert at playing lousily these 5 notes. Right? So, in other words, what is going to make a musician a better musician is that every time he plays these 5 notes, it's different. He tries something else to make it more perfect. In other words, no repetition whatsoever. No repetition. Every time, different to make it more perfect. And that's why musicians are never satisfied. Tennis players, they are never satisfied. I'm sure Federer is not happy with his game. That's why he's so good. Because they there is this constant avoidance of repetition, this constant injection of consciousness in what you are doing, meaning the injection of understanding. There are all kinds of understanding, right? There is understanding at the conceptual level, there is understanding at the body level with the sensation, there is understanding at the perceptual level through the senses. So there are all kinds of understanding, but it's every form of understanding takes place at the level of consciousness. So it is the injection of consciousness in that which, seen from the outside, may look like a repetition, which gives the process its efficiency. But the efficiency is precisely not the result of repetition, but the opposite of the trying something new, trying to improve, listening, observing, bringing the intelligence into it. So in the Tripura Rasya, an ancient traditional text from India, there is a story that the guy who is on the mantra yoga or the japa yoga, I don't remember, I haven't read that in many years, but the truth seeker who is on the, he's repeating, you know, Coca-Cola, Om Bhuva Swaha, whatever. And so he's repeating. And the goddess, after multiple lifetimes of repetition, multiple lifetimes, like zillions, you know, at some point, is fed up with. So she sends him a guru on the direct path. So the guy said to he said to the local Brahmin, sorry, I'm not listening to you. I've stopped doing the mantra. I'm going to tour the mountain in my country to find a teacher on the direct path. To use a little bit intelligence, love, beauty, to use a little bit these forms of understanding. So practice.
So just be and no nonsense cultivation of the mind, zero?
When the thought about what we are talking about here comes to you in the form of a question, of seeking understanding, that's perfect. It has to come from interest. I mean, who is interested in repetitious practice? Nobody. Everybody acknowledges it's boring. Right? So, if you are getting bored doing whatever you are doing, your boredom is a sign, get the hell out of here. Stop it. You see? As long as you are interested in doing it, do it. You know? So, watch careful your interest, your enthusiasm for whatever you are doing, and follow your enthusiasm.
So if a grateful practice serves you well, then you can keep it until you think it's stupid.
If you are enthusiastic about doing something, do it. And the point is, in your life, follow your heart from moment to moment. And only the stupid mind doesn't change. Remember that. Because your heart changes directions. The mind is like the Titanic. Iceberg straight ahead. let's reorganize the chairs on the deck.
Thank you, Francis.
Hi, Francis. This is kind of related to you're talking about a musician, and it reminds me of doing writing, where I think you called it a consciousness peeking through or whatever. But when it comes from an impersonal place and it just seems to flow naturally, because it's something that I enjoy doing and I've had a lot of practice at. Same with photography. What I'm wondering is, it seems like in a sense there's like, I hate to use the word predestination, but that's almost like it was chosen for me. And I'm wondering if you can consciously choose to be a different kind of instrument. Specifically, I tried to make a video when I was out in the desert on meditation. And I mean, I have so much more practice writing than speaking. And a lot of the video was just silent. I thought that might be kind of a novelty, actually, but and I was even uncomfortable going back when watching it, because it's obviously pretty, the gears aren't cranking smoothly. So the question is, can one sort of create a new avenue or channel willfully, or because in my mind I'm comparing it with like doing 40 years of writing.
In France, we have this saying, chasser le naturel, il revient au galop. I translate that, suppress that which is natural to you, it comes back with a vengeance. Something like that. I suffer of the opposite ailment. I don't like to write, I like to speak. And so some well-minded people are helping me write a book. And the most funny thing is that I know how to write well in French. I know how I've gone through all the, I have all the codes. I know all the codes. I have all of that. I don't make mistakes. But it's a hustle. So since it is a hustle, whatever I write will have this contraction, embedded in it. When I speak, I don't have contractions. So why not accept the instrument? Why do you want to change your instrument?
For practical purposes, I don't think there's much of a market for non-dual writing. And look at how people, they discover teachers via videos, and
there is not what I said. There was his friend, still a friend, Chris Ebert, and he wanted to do things. I told him, there is no market in Advaita. Go to Buddhism, which he did. He's doing videos about Buddhism.
Yeah, I know. I get emails from them, what do you want to hear? And make a donation. So, that's part of the question is like, how much do you make a concession to what people want?
What do you want to do? Some things that you don't like to do. If you don't like to do, what?
Because
I am writing this book because I have stupidly said yes. So then I'm cooked. So I will go through that, but
I'll help you with that. It's the.
That was an infomercial to announce the book. To come out in 10 years. And you see, it's more natural to do it just like that. You see, it has this perfume. And someone who writes well and enjoys doing it, the books are beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I currently am spending a lot of time doing work that feels like an effort because I'm, for example, was writing a white paper for a client about election data security. And I had to spend a couple of months, researching it. And some of it was a little bit interesting, but I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't paid. So I want to move towards doing, what I love and comes naturally, if possible, and not spend so much time forcing myself to do something.
Yeah, I wouldn't write too many white papers. Besides, it's politically incorrect.
So there are people who are able to forge a very independent lifestyle, for example, doing videos and people donating through Patreon. But it brings up another question, though. It's like, some people think spiritual teaching, it should never be charged for, like only donation basis. Like you look at like Robert Adams, he never promoted himself. Some of his students helped him survive. He didn't even teach until he was kind of put in the corner because of Parkinson's. He was, like, he said he was running away from people his whole life. So it's, in other words, you don't want to mix motivations or have a contrived reason for doing something. Again, like you say, it should be just natural.
Yeah, it should be natural, and you should follow your enthusiasm for whatever you're doing, and
just have faith that it works out. The more I put into it,
and sometimes you have to separate the way you make a living from doing what you really like to do.
And that's what I've
because
always done.
even people who have a vocation, there are chores. Take a performing artist, a soloist, a violinist who performs in a different city every day. I mean, he's away from his family. He is in a new hotel room every day. He's taking a plane, waiting at the airport, going through security every day. I mean, there are big chores, big disadvantages. So every job, even if it is a vocation, has chores. So what you can do is have a job to make a living with chores, like 4 hours a day, not too much, and then the rest of the time devoted to whatever it is that you do. Painting, writing, whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I've done it. So I'm free to just do,
Use your intelligence, that.
Even writing though has, as you say, it has chores like editing, which is not all that fun. You have to go back. I'd rather just flow and do something new, but I accumulate piles of things to be edited. So.
Yeah, and sometimes, when I was in France, I had this guy. He fell in love with the truth. He was coming to. We had a small group in Bordeaux, and he was looking for a job. And one day, he came to me, and he told, and he was saying, yeah, what I would like to do is to have plenty of time to read books about spirituality and to meditate. I said, yeah, so if that's your desire, it sounds impersonal, you'll find a perfect job for that. And a few weeks later, he comes and tells me, I found the perfect job. I am working in this small hotel in Bordeaux, and I am night desk. So I start at 10 in the evening, and I leave at 6. Hardly anybody comes, especially for most of the time. All I do, I read, I meditate, I read, I meditate, I read, I meditate. And I get paid for that. Yeah. And from time to time someone came and said, okay, here is the key.
I think there's also this idea in
and nobody else wants his job. You see what I mean? Because the people say, oh, being up all night.
Yeah, sounds good. There's also this notion that if you just remove the mental limitations, that you can do anything that your heart desires, or impersonally. That it's only the beliefs, only the limitations. In a way. But you take sort of a more practical...
The point is, we would like to know in a sense, the Western mind, we would like to know what the end point is, and so that we can decide of a path on a straight line that is going to take us from here to the end point. Now, I have news for you. The end point is some plot in a cemetery somewhere. So, so that's not the way it works. The way it should work is just what is the next step. So to keep the future wide open in not knowing. And what decides the next step is my current heart's desire. You see? So it's not that I decide all the trajectory ahead of time, the shortcut, the straight line. No. All I need to know is, right now, do I move like that? Do I take a step here, a step there, a step back? The first direction. And then I'm in a new place. I ask my heart, now, what is it going to be? And then, in hindsight, the path is going to be meandering. But it's a happy path.
Yeah, I can see that as something like, the writing or photography. But there's been times when, for example, I wasn't happy where I was living. And I sat down with Laura, and she helped me actually look at instead of what I don't want, what is it that I really want in a kind of impersonal way, and things that I love, the qualities I would like, where I'd like to live. And it just seems self-evident. It's like, oh, that's what I want.
So she helped you discover your heart's desire.
Yeah.
No, but you are old enough to be able to know yourself.
Well, thank you very much.
You see, the point I was making is a different one, is that your heart's desire is in this moment, right? And you can say, okay, in this moment, I want this house like that, and I'm going to take the first step because that's what I want to be doing. My heart's desire in this moment is to take the first step towards that. But what is important...
It was not a strategy, though. I let go of it entirely.
Yeah, but you can have a strategy. It's perfectly okay, provided that's what you want. And then the next moment, what do I want to do? You revisit constantly because your guide is your heart's desire at every moment. And you can have a strategy. And if your heart's desire is, okay, yes, I keep in this direction, yes, then the next step will be in the same direction. In this way, you live your life without regrets. Because at every single moment you have been doing what you wanted to be doing, given the context. You see? So how could you possibly have any regrets?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always in the moment. I see that.
The problems come always from things like, well, my heart is telling me not to marry this girl, but I am in this Indian family, my parents have contacted the parents, and she has all the requirements, her skin is white enough. Have you looked at the advertising in the Indian newspaper? Huh? The requirement? And then they call us racists. No. So the mistakes come always from this external impositions that we think we have to go against our heart's desire for some weird reasons.
So only go against your heart desires if you have to for practical reasons, temporarily.
Yeah, no, it can be, it can be, yeah, I love my parents, I'm sure they have made the good decision for me, and
well,
yeah, but you are the final judge of these decisions, and you have to put your intelligence into that and to say, okay, yeah, but if I am miserable in this marriage, then it's not going to make my wife happy, and ultimately my parents not happy, and the children I will have with this woman happy, etc. So you have to put some wisdom into it, and you will discover that your heart's desire was the right thing to follow.
Well, I'm not going to be mistaken for Indian with my blonde hair.
But you are fair enough.
I'm fair enough?
Fair-skinned enough.
Just one question. It's actually very similar, but I learned a lot about setting long-term goals and stuff.
Saying what?
Long-term goals. So what do you think about setting goals? Long-term, short-term, yeah. So
Yeah. There is nothing wrong about long-term goals, as long as in the moment itself, that's what you want to move towards. Then you are following your heart's desire. You see?
okay,
But it's important that to be certain that, yes, that's what I want to be doing in this moment. And not something which is imposed. Okay, I have to go to church because, I'd rather go play golf. But I have to go to church because, what are people in my community think about me? What are they going to think about me if I don't go to church? I'd rather play golf. Especially there is a lot of availability of the golf course because everybody is at church.
Um, just one more question concerning the book. You were talking about like when you set a goal to write a book, and then you're in the middle of that book, and suddenly you just don't. It's a kind of an effort to continue, but you set the goal to write a book, and then you don't would you just leave it and let it go and not finish it? But then
Well, I don't know. But loving people are helping me. And I don't... Whatever I do, it's my heart's desire.
Okay. Even though you stop in the middle, maybe, because maybe in that moment you don't feel doing it anymore, then... Because you said follow your heart from moment to moment, so it's just, yeah.
Yes, I've said yes to writing a book. It's less a problem than saying yes to a marriage. Oops. Too late. You said it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mary, you have often explained that consciousness is that which allows us to hear and perceive you as you speak. Did I say that? No. I said that consciousness is that which hears, not that which allows us to hear. It's not the same. Because the way you are putting it, they are us hearing thanks to consciousness which allows for that to happen. Whereas I'm saying something different. I'm saying that consciousness is that which hears. And which also gives itself the permission to hear, if you want to put it that way. But it is the same that hears and that allows for hearing to happen. It is also the same that speaks, by the way. Only one speaker, one hearer. Okay, then Mary goes on. I wonder, though, if I was unable to see or hear you, in other words, did not have the senses of seeing and hearing, then how would consciousness be defined? That which is, whatever that is. Amy, recently I've been criticized for my belief that it is okay for teachers of Advaita to be paid an income. I was told that Maharshi was against such a thing. How do you feel about this? And what would your response be to such criticism? Well, even when Ramana Maharshi was living in his cave, people would come and bring him food, bring him energy to survive. He didn't survive just from eating the insects in his cave. Later on, people came and built an ashram around him. That required materials and labor. And also, Ramana Maharshi was not living from thin air, but he ate vegetables and fruit and milk and spices. So he lived in the different era, in a different culture, where bartering was more common. In the modern world, money is a common denominator for exchanges of goods and services. It's a very clever means to exchange goods and services. But it was called in India the service of the guru. The service of the guru, meaning labor and also duros or whatever, rupees. So nothing has changed. So everything, we have to look at extremes in these questions. It's okay to be reasonable, to function. Everybody understands that. It's okay to be compassionate and to make it possible for everybody who is interested to attend the teachings. But it's okay also to ask for those who can afford it to contribute. That's all I have to say about that. And I think, going back to Ramana Maharshi, that was a position he took since he was accepting goods and services from the people who were attending his meetings. Mike, I recognize that the essence of color is in the visuality of it, so a color could not exist outside an awareness. I recognize that any solidity I come across is entirely a feeling, so could not be outside awareness. I recognize that a color could not be imposed on an abstract out there surface or shape by brain processes outside awareness, because that would mean a color existing outside of its visualness, which would be impossible. So my belief in externality seems to go in and out. I have to think myself out of the belief in externality, which is hard work. And I get a feeling of happiness for a few seconds. But that feeling of externality always comes back. It's like a battle back and forth. You may have said something about why do you choose to believe your feelings of being separate, even though your logic tells you the opposite. Okay, it depends what you mean by externality. And the question is, external to what? Or to whom? You have a form of idealist Advaita in which the claim is made that nothing exists outside of mind. obviously, things exist outside of my mind, of Francis' mind, such as the thoughts that are currently in your mind. So I accept that things exist outside of my mind. So there are external things outside of my mind. Whether there are things that exist outside of all minds, such as this flower, perhaps yes, perhaps no. So, externality with regard to minds as envisioned separately or in totality, I don't exclude this possibility. Because then it would require for me to twist my intelligence. I don't want to do that. So perhaps the conflict you seem to be describing in your question is such a one, in which you're trying to convince yourself that there is no externality with respect to minds. Now, it is something very different to talk about when we talk about externality with regard to consciousness / reality. You see, that's different. Nothing is external to reality. That's why consciousness is just a tool which is used in the Vedantic schools to give the truth seeker a glimpse of the experience of reality. That's all. But it's about reality more than it is about consciousness. It's about Brahman more than it is about Atman. There is one single reality, and there is nothing external to that single reality. And if there is only one single reality, that which is really hearing these words in this moment is that single reality. So, that's my answer to this question. I hope it helps. Lucia, in an interview, you said that it is very important to have a direct and frequent contact with your teacher. I don't think I said that. I said that in my case, it was important. I didn't make a general rule of that. I don't know. So, in my case, it was very important to have a direct and frequent contact with my teacher. So then she goes on, this has very discouraged me because I don't think this is possible for me. What else can a person like me do besides attending events like this, watching videos, reading books, and attending 1 or 2 retreats a year? When, you know, Lucia, you do your best, and that's all you can do. And then if you need, in your case, in your specific case, to have more frequent interaction with your teacher, the Red Sea will open for you. Things will happen in your life, provided you just follow your heart's desire. But if it doesn't, if it doesn't happen, it means it was not needed in your case. Don't worry about anything like that. It means that then All you need is what you are getting right now. Besides, you know, the modern teachings, using the internet, using video, using the ability you have to, the interactivity of you asking questions and me answering online already is something that makes you much closer to the teacher than what was the case when I was a truth seeker. All we had were books, and they were not easily accessible if you live in somewhere which was not Paris. Mary. This morning was spectacularly beautiful here. I've heard you say that putting words to an experience of love or beauty diminishes it. I think I understand what you mean. When I experience something like this perfect scene, I'm not naturally inclined to sit and just savor it. It's as if I take it in instantly, but then don't know what to do with it. It's not a desire to turn away from it so much as I just don't know how to be with it with ease. I know this is important, that sometimes I have a tendency to feel uncomfortable in the presence of truth, love, beauty. There is an agitation. What is this? How do I deal with? It doesn't feel like a separate self-problem, but I guess it must be, as that seems to be the root of all problems. You know, it's like your question is like, let's assume you like chocolate. And you are given a very nice Belgian chocolate. You enjoy it. And then you ask the question, what do I do with it? Too late. Move on. There is nothing to do with it. That's the point. The pleasure of the chocolate is in eating the chocolate, not with doing something with it. In the same way, the pleasure, the enjoyment of the beauty is just what you got at that moment. Whether it lasted 1 second or whether it lasted 1 minute is irrelevant. Some chocolates are long shots, some are short shots. So, how to deal with it? Just enjoy it. And then you say, I feel uncomfortable in the presence of truth. This discomfort comes after. Just as this very nice piece of chocolate they give you a headache if you have a problem with your liver. But it's a bad analogy here. A glimpse of truth never will give you a bad feeling. It's ignorance coming back with a vengeance that gives you this bad aftertaste. So a moment of understanding, a glimpse of beauty, a moment of love, just enjoy it. A moment of humor, enjoy it. But then, don't try to make it last longer. It has its own shelf life. You know, if we try to make last longer, we kill it. We In the Goethe's Faust, no, I say that in German. No, now, in the theatrical play Faust by Goethe, Faust is an old nerd who is in love with a young girl. He makes a deal with the devil to become handsome and young and get the girl. And in exchange of which he has to respect a rule, otherwise he will lose his soul. And the rule is never to think, I think, verweile, liebe Stunde, denn du bist so schön, or something like that, which means remain, oh beloved moment, for you are so beautiful. So the moment you want the beautiful moment to last, you lose your soul. That's the idea. You lose your soul. Because the next moment is here. Move on. Everything is the manifestation of your own beauty, of your own intelligence. So make your life a constant contemplation. Never look back. Just enjoy the gift of the moment. Luciana, a long question. At your Paris retreats, I had the most beautiful and happy time ever. Thank you for the infomercial. And my understanding grew incommensurably. It is obvious that to be in your presence and with friends who share this same love for truth is essential for the establishment of the peace we are. But I have many questions now to ask, and I'm so grateful for these precious webcasts. They allow for a continuity in my trust and a kind of reassurance that has been essential throughout my journey in this path. Because through your answers, understanding always happens, sometimes like a sudden hurricane, others very smoothly and gently, but all the time, just as you said, on a need-to-know basis. Now, I've watched an interview you gave a very long time ago in which you said it was very difficult, if not impossible, for transmission to happen online, that the actual physical presence of the Guru was necessary. But I'm thinking this cannot be the case when it comes to the transmission that makes possible the glimpse of consciousness universality, because it happened to me, and I'm sure I'm not an exception. Can you please explain to me what is really transmission, and has your teaching experience and the advances in technology changed your understanding about the ways it can take place? Well, I didn't say that the actual physical presence of the Guru was necessary for the transmission. I said that it was more difficult to happen through a book, online, or through a 2x4 hitting you behind the head. So these are possible circumstantial circumstances in which a glimpse of our true nature can happen. So I never make the claim that it was necessary. However, the difference is that in the presence of the Guru, if there is a genuine interest for it, the glimpse will happen necessarily. So that's a big difference. But it is not, there are many paths who lead to Rome. So that's not the only way. Now, I've said earlier that I feel that with the internet, with the interactivity, with the sound and the images, it adds more layers, more dimension to the transmission. It makes it easier, if you will, if you are not physically present. But of course, being physically present is always better. I watch tennis online, but it's different when I'm there. I like to listen to concerts on my sound system, but it sounds always better when I am in the concert hall. I can watch a theatrical play on TV, but it's always better when I am there in the audience attending this live performance. Why? Beats me. I have no explanation for that. I can find 1,000 explanations, but I'm not going to twist my brain. Oh, a longer, even longer question. By Raman. And he starts, forgive the length of this email. He thought that because there were not too many questions yesterday, there might be time. And so he says, my experiential understanding is that if I walk in someone else's shoes, then I would do exactly as they would do. My experiential understanding is also that there is some inner essence in each of us which experiences this world. These two experienced truths have led me to the realization that my inner essence has to be exactly the same as everyone else's inner essence, since I would act exactly like them. My question is that at my best, I realize a universal inner essence consciousness, but it feels limited to all humans, and maybe even all living things, especially my dog. I know this is still duality, because I can't honestly say I realize the inner essence of inanimate objects. This doesn't really bother me, because for the moment, when I am living this ultimate understanding, I feel quite comfortable. That is until the next yoga exercise, when I rediscover it all over again. Anyway, my question is this: is it pronounced champagne or champagne? I'm only kidding, forgive the irreverence. My question is really just confirmation that my overall understanding is not in error, even though at this stage it is not non-duality. When you say the essence in each being is the same, that begs two questions. First, what is meant by essence? Second, what is meant by the same? Does the same mean a similar one, although a different one, but similar one, just as any two electrons are the same? They have the same mass, they have the same electrical charge, but they may be located in different places and have different momenta. So, is it sameness or is it identity? So, in my book, sameness doesn't do it. Identity, it is the very same consciousness that perceives in you, in me, in all human beings. Not two similar, in all respects, two similar consciousnesses, but the very same reality / consciousness that perceives. And essence. If essence means my reality, the reality of my being, essence comes from, right? It's the infinitive of the verb to be in Latin, esse, to be. It means to be. So my beingness is my reality. So essence means reality. It doesn't mean, because often the word essence is used in a very different meaning. For instance, the essence of a perfume. It's rosemary. Okay, I smell the rosemary here, and I smell the rosemary there, meaning it gives me the same impression. So I say the same, but it's obviously not the same. There is something similar. There are two similar molecules. Yeah, they're the same molecules, but there are different molecules here and there, just like the two electrons I was alluding to. So essence doesn't work in this case, because there is still a difference. That's why I prefer to use the word reality rather than the word essence. And Advaita means only one reality. So I hope this, so anything short of that understanding of the oneness of reality / consciousness won't allow for inner peace, stability. I have a few more questions too. So yesterday there were no questions, today there are more. And multiple questions. Pyrrhus. 1. Doing investigating the sense of me experiment reveals one experience over and over, and that is a vague, non-local being that is nowhere in the body per se. Body seems to just have happened to this being. This experience is identical to two sudden vivid out-of-body experience that has happened in past year when body and the room were perceived from a vague spot. Is this experiment reliving just the memory of those events? Am I stuck on a memory? What these two events had in common is the witness of these two events. That which was perceiving these two events. And definitely that's non-local. Definitely that's you. I say that's non-local because all the low C appear in it. Therefore, that in which all the locations appear is non-local. So it's non-local, yes. Second question. While deeply contemplating the absolute reality in every moment phenomenon, giving it any attributes feels like limiting it. Is this ignorance, arrogance, or prejudice? No, you're correct. Every attribute that we give it conceptually limits it. So the use of these attributes can only be a temporary one. It's in the vedantic tradition, they use the expression of the use of a thorn to extract a thorn from the skin. And for instance, the concept of infinity will be an extracting thorn which we use to extract the concept of being finite, as an example. But then once the concept of being finite has been invalidated, we don't need to keep the concept of infinite, because it's still limiting. So then we throw away the extracting thorn together with the extracted thorn. Otherwise, the extracting thorn can perhaps goes into our own skin and hurt us. Okay, last question. Joanne, could you please talk about the relation between love and hate? Somewhere on YouTube, Rupert says that at the basis of hate, there is love. Everything being consciousness also implies hate and love are not that different. I also ask you this because I'm involved in a divorce in which my ex-wife and children don't want to allow any contact, communication for years now. Well, that's a different story. And regarding the story about the children and the wife, ask this question some other time and mentioning what your problem is, and I try to help you. Regarding the love and hate, at first sight, we would look at love and hate as a pair of opposites. But that is not the case. Because for a pair of opposites to be a true pair of opposites, the two elements of the pair have to belong to the same level of reality. We cannot compare or balance out elements that don't belong to the same level of reality. For instance, we cannot engage or fight from the waking state someone we have encountered during our dream. Doesn't make much sense to hate them, for instance, or to love them. So, when we see hate and love as opposites, we see them as belonging to the same level of reality. That's not true, because love is a noumenal quality, meaning a quality of the absolute. So, to take it a little further up, what it boils down to is the ultimate pair of opposite, if you will, would be, for instance, being versus non-existence, non-being. It is not a true pair of opposite. Why? Because I have news for you, being is. In other words, there is something rather than nothing. Therefore, being is, non-being is an impossibility as a result of that. So non-being, absolute non-being, is just a concept, but it has no reality. Therefore, it's an illusion, not having reality. Whereas being is real. There is something rather than nothing. So being and non-being are not a valid pair of opposites. In the same way, wisdom and ignorance are not a real pair of opposites. Because wisdom is our natural state. Ignorance is not our true nature. To illustrate that with an example, let's take the case of an actor, John Doe, who plays Hamlet on stage. You cannot say that John Doe suffers from a personality disorder because he has two personalities, John Doe and Hamlet. That's not true. These are not a true pair of opposites, because his true nature, is John Doe, and Hamlet is not his true nature. So on that level, you can see that ignorance on the one hand and wisdom are not a true pair of opposites. Going down from there, one more step. Love is the attribute of wisdom. Hate is the attribute of ignorance. Since wisdom and ignorance are not a true pair of opposites, it follows that love and hate are not a true pair of opposites either, meaning that, as Rupert rightfully said, under hate there is love.